It's official. This motorcycle just got banned across 12 US states. Not because it's unsafe, not because it failed, but because new laws made it illegal to register, insure, or even sell. Owners are outraged, and what's happening behind the scenes is far worse than anyone expected. Watch till the end, because the most shocking part isn't that the bike got banned. It's how easily yours could be next. You can own it, but you can't ride it. Across 12 US states, motorcycle owners are waking up to a new reality. They haven't broken any laws. Their bikes still pass emissions tests. The engines run perfectly. But at the state level, rules have shifted quietly. And what was once road legal can no longer be registered, insured, or even operated. For riders who've spent years maintaining vintage machines or investing in high-performance models, this isn't just frustrating, it's a betrayal. Some bans have been implemented through environmental policy, others through safety guidelines, and in a growing number of cases, through digital infrastructure rules that didn't even exist when the bike was built. The result is the same. The machine is now stuck in limbo. You can store it, you can look at it. But if you try to take it onto public roads, you risk a citation, or worse, a denial of renewal at your local DMV. In many cases, the bans are not enforced with headlines or public announcements. There is no breaking news bulletin. Instead, the policy changes live deep within registration databases, inspection systems, and insurance underwriting software. A bike that was registered last year might be flagged this year without warning. Riders are left scrambling for answers, while their machines are rendered useless in the eyes of the state. What makes this even more disorienting is that the bans often come with no clear explanation. Riders call agencies and get conflicting responses. Dealerships deny knowledge. Forums light up with questions that go unanswered. The sense of confusion isn't accidental. It's structural. The policies are designed to remove risk quietly, not invite public pushback. And yet, this isn't new. The first major warning came decades ago, and it involved a motorcycle that tried to do everything right. We've dug deep into the story behind these bans, and trust us, it's not what you think. If this shocked you, hit that like button. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. The bike that met federal standards and still got banned. It passed the toughest tests in Washington, but one state shut it down anyway. In the early 1980s, Yamaha introduced a machine that defied the image of the dirty, polluting two-stroke engine. The RS 350 was lightweight, agile, and, most impressively, clean-burning. Yamaha equipped it with catalytic converters straight from the factory, making it the first two-stroke motorcycle sold in the United States to use emissions-reducing technology. It even met the Environmental Protection Agency's federal standards. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. California's Air Resources Board had its own stricter emissions requirements. And while Yamaha had managed to thread the federal needle, they couldn't or wouldn't redesign the bike to meet California's tougher standards. The reason wasn't just technical, it was economic. California represented such a massive portion of US motorcycle sales that no brand could afford to ignore it. If a model couldn't sell there, it often wasn't worth selling anywhere. Rather than invest in further modifications, Yamaha made a quieter decision. They stopped selling the RZ 350 in the United States after 1986. There was no recall, no scandal, no rider injury. The machine simply vanished from new showrooms, cut off not by federal failure, but by the weight of one state's rules. What followed was telling. Riders loved the bike. It gained a cult following. But Yamaha never brought a similar two-stroke back to the American market. The lesson had been learned. Meeting baseline standards wasn't enough. If a machine couldn't pass the most extreme regulations, especially California's, it wouldn't be built at all. And while this ban came through emissions law, the next one came wrapped in something far more personal: childhood nostalgia. Want better gear without the big price tags? The stuff we trust is in the description. Go see what fits your ride. The moment childhood design was outlawed, in the 1970s, every kid on the block wanted one. Whether it was the Raleigh Chopper, the Schwinn Stingray, or the Huffy Dragster, these weren't just bikes. They were miniaturized symbols of cool. With banana seats, high-rise handlebars, and top-tube-mounted gear shifters, they were designed to look and feel like the motorcycles every child admired. They were fun. They were bold. and they were everywhere. But within a few short years, they were gone. The top tube shifter, styled after car transmissions, was the problem. A handful of injury reports surfaced, mostly from kids falling forward onto the metal knob. The injuries, while rare, were enough to trigger concern. By 1974, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission had redefined safety expectations for children's bicycles. Top tube controls were no longer acceptable. What followed wasn't a sweeping legislative ban. It was quieter. Insurance concerns, retailer hesitations, and liability fears did the work of law without needing a law. Raleigh pulled the chopper from U.S. distribution, Schwinn redesigned the Stingray, Huffy re-engineered its youth lineup. By 1976, the muscle bike category had effectively collapsed in America. What makes this story more striking is that the majority of these bikes were not recalled. They weren't declared defective. They were simply redesigned out of existence. And with their disappearance, an entire aesthetic, a generation's image of what a cool bike looked like, was erased. The story doesn't end there, because even though some of the companies tried to keep the spirit alive overseas, the American market had been reshaped. But this wasn't the last time a ban would come without legislation. Sometimes all it takes is a new standard and a fear of what might go wrong. And if regulators could ban a bike for how it looked, the question becomes, what happens when they start banning bikes for where they're ridden? The bikes that got banned from nature. The trail is open to the public. The bike is legal in all 50 states. So why can't you ride there? That's the paradox faced by millions of American cyclists when they step foot into one of the nation's most prized wilderness areas. Since the mid-1980s, a quiet but sweeping ban has made bicycles illegal in over 100 million acres of federally protected land. The reason has nothing to do with emissions, noise, or safety. It has everything to do with a legal interpretation that equated a bicycle with a motor vehicle, even if it has no engine. The Wilderness Act of 1964 was designed to preserve undeveloped land in its most natural state. It banned all forms of mechanized transport, but in 1984, that clause was reinterpreted to include bicycles, even though they were not mentioned in the original legislation. The result? A sweeping and total exclusion of bikes from vast stretches of public land, including trails that remain accessible to hikers, horseback riders, and even some off-road vehicles operating just outside wilderness boundaries. For mountain bikers, especially those who advocate for sustainable trail use, this ban feels arbitrary and outdated. Unlike motorbikes or cars, bicycles are quiet, non-polluting, and leave minimal environmental impact when used responsibly. But under the current legal framework, a carbon fiber mountain bike is treated the same as a dirt bike in protected zones. The battle between conservationists and riders has remained bitter, but largely unseen. While environmental groups argue that bikes threaten the solitude and natural integrity of wilderness areas, cyclists see it as a form of transportation discrimination, and the longer the ban stands, the deeper the divide becomes. But this is not the only time a form of superior mobility was banned, not because it was harmful, but because it worked too well. The racing innovation that was too good to be legal. It was faster, more efficient, and, for a moment, completely unstoppable. And that's exactly why it was banned. In 1933, a French cyclist named Francis Faure rode a recumbent bicycle to a new world speed record. He did not win by a small margin. He crushed the competition. That single race exposed a simple truth the cycling world could not ignore. Traditional upright bicycles were no longer the most advanced machines on the track. The response from the Union Cycliste Internationale, or UCI, was immediate and surgical. In 1934, the organization revised its technical rules to redefine what constituted a race-legal bicycle. Recumbents, which allowed the rider to sit in a laid-back position with superior aerodynamics and lower wind resistance, were no longer permitted, not because they were unsafe, not because they failed, but because they worked too well. This was not just a regulatory setback, it was a death sentence for innovation. Recumbent designs like the Velocar were erased from mainstream competition. Without access to races, manufacturers stopped producing them at scale. Without media coverage, the public stopped demanding them. And without demand, they faded from public consciousness. Nearly 100 years later, that rule still stands. The ban reshaped the future of cycling. It ensured that only one type of bike, the upright diamond frame design, would receive funding, sponsorship, and technological advancement. Even in the United States, amateur events followed the UCI's lead. Recumbents became niche oddities, relegated to hobbyists and fringe races. When success is penalized because it disrupts tradition, innovation dies in silence. And once a ruling body excludes something from competition, its market future is effectively erased. But not all bans are about competition. Some are about what happens when a product meant to carry families simply falls apart. The recall that wiped out a whole class of cargo bikes, they did not violate emissions laws. They were not caught in a tech scandal. They just broke, literally. In early 2024, the Dutch-made Babbo cargo bikes, beloved by parents and eco-conscious commuters, were suddenly pulled from markets across the United States and Canada. The reason was structural: frame cracks, weld failures, and eventual collapses under normal use. For years, Babbo bikes were seen as practical alternatives to cars, especially in cities like Portland and Brooklyn. They offered large front boxes for children, groceries, or cargo, and featured electric assist motors that made them ideal for daily errands. But as reports of stress fractures mounted, investigations by Dutch authorities triggered a wave of alerts in North America. By the first quarter of the year, Babbo bikes were effectively banned from sale in 2 countries. Retailers were ordered to stop shipping inventory. Owners were urged to cease riding immediately. Some insurance companies even threatened to drop coverage if the bikes remained in use. It was not a matter of political retaliation or emissions compliance. It was a blunt safety verdict. If it breaks under normal conditions, it cannot be allowed on the road. There was no trial, no public hearing, no campaign to save the brand. Babbo vanished in weeks. The recall took out not just one model, but an entire product class, and the consequences went further. Bike shops dependent on cargo sales lost a core supplier, urban families lost a mobility solution, and confidence in cargo bike safety, already fragile, took a lasting hit. But while this collapse was due to cracked metal, the next ban came from something invisible, embedded in the bike itself, and even more devastating to the trust of parents. Paint, poison, and the collapse of a parent's trust. It looked like the safest ride in the world, a front-loading tricycle designed for toddlers. Electric assist, reinforced frame, marketed with smiling families in pastel colors. But in 2023, the Bunch Bike's preschool cargo trike was found to contain dangerously high levels of lead in the very paint that coated its metal components. Lead exposure, especially in young children, is not just a health risk, it is a neurological time bomb. It has been linked to cognitive delays, behavioral issues, and irreversible developmental harm. So when the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission confirmed the contamination, there was no second chance. The product was banned from sale immediately. Retailers were instructed to return inventory. Customers were contacted and advised to stop using the bike. There was no repair option, no paint swap, no interim fix. The trike was finished. And for thousands of families who had chosen Bunch for its safety reputation, the emotional fallout was immense. Parents had selected this product specifically to avoid cars, school traffic, and the risks of street commuting. They believed the brand stood for protection, peace of mind, and thoughtful design. Instead, they were left with a poisoned frame and a betrayal of trust. The deeper impact was industry-wide. Manufacturers began conducting emergency audits of supply chains. Overseas paint suppliers came under scrutiny, and a quiet fear settled across the family cycling market. What if this happened again? This wasn't just a ban, it was a rupture in confidence, and it proved how even one overlooked component, invisible to the naked eye, can destroy a brand overnight. But while these bikes were banned for where they rode or how they were built, the next wave, you cannot even see it. The code inside that made your bike illegal. CF Moto's rise in the American motorcycle market was no accident. Riders flocked to their models for affordability, sharp design, and surprising performance. The 760, the 650, and other street-ready bikes filled a gap between budget and quality. Machines that worked, priced far below competitors. But beneath that polished exterior sat a small piece of hardware that would change everything: the T-Box. The T-Box is CF Moto's proprietary telematics system. It allows for remote diagnostics, over-the-air updates, GPS tracking, and ride behavior analysis. For most consumers, it was a welcome convenience, something that brought motorcycles closer to the smart capabilities of modern cars. But for United States regulators, it represented something far more dangerous: a potential data pipe directly to servers controlled by a foreign adversary. By 2024, the United States Bureau of Industry and Security had turned its attention toward connected vehicles. Not just their functions, but their data flows. The concern wasn't that these bikes were broken. It was that they were connected to systems outside the control of American oversight. And that distinction redefined what it meant for a bike to be safe or legal. Even with clean emissions and a stable frame, the code embedded within the system could make the machine unfit for import or sale. The result was immediate. CF Moto's future model years were flagged for investigation, and dealer shipments stalled. Buyers with models already on the road suddenly faced uncertainty about service support, parts availability, and long-term registration. It wasn't performance that brought CF Moto into the spotlight. It was surveillance. And just as regulators began cracking down, another brand came into view. That new standard, it wasn't based on what a bike did, it was based on what it could do in the wrong hands. Washington's digital firewall hits the road. This time it's not about what the bike does, it's about what it might do. In the past, product bans were reactive. A defect appeared, a failure occurred, someone was harmed, and then regulators stepped in. But beginning with the draft proposals issued in 2024 and scheduled to take effect by 2027, the United States is adopting a new doctrine: preemptive disqualification based on origin of software. Under proposed rules from the Bureau of Industry and Security, any motorcycle or vehicle containing connected systems developed or controlled by a company from a foreign adversary nation, China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea, may be banned from sale in the United States. These systems include, but are not limited to, GPS tracking modules, wireless data transmitters, and telematics firmware. Even if the hardware works flawlessly, even if the vehicle meets all performance and environmental benchmarks, if the embedded code originates from a flagged supplier, the vehicle may be denied import, registration, or resale. It is a philosophical shift, not about what has gone wrong, but about what could go wrong. A digital firewall applied to two-wheeled machines, off-road utility vehicles, and anything else capable of sending a signal beyond American borders. This approach mirrors past bans on Huawei and ZTE, where telecommunications infrastructure was treated not just as a business concern, but a national security issue. The same playbook now applies to motorcycles, which means the future of connected mobility isn't just an engineering challenge, it's a geopolitical negotiation. And for riders, that negotiation comes with very real consequences. Prices may rise, support may evaporate, and once promising machines may be blacklisted before they even hit the road. And what happens to the people left holding the keys to banned machines? That's where the fallout begins. The dealership trap, selling banned machines. Across the United States, motorcycle dealers are staring down a quiet crisis. Showrooms filled with shiny, unsold bikes are no longer assets. They are time bombs. When a model gets banned, whether due to software, emissions, or regulatory ambiguity, it does not just disappear from the market, it becomes a burden. Dealers are now caught in the crossfire between shifting policy, confused buyers, and unrecoverable losses. One dealership in Kansas received a delivery of CF Moto motorcycles in late 2023, unaware that federal regulators were preparing to flag the brand's embedded telemetry systems as potential national security threats. Within 3 months, those motorcycles were no longer sellable. No recall had been issued. No customer notification existed. The bikes sat on the floor like normal, but behind the scenes, insurers pulled coverage. State departments paused registrations, and parts suppliers froze orders. Dealers often operate on thin margins and high turnover. When they cannot move inventory, their financing stalls. Floor plan loans, which allow them to carry dozens of motorcycles at once, become ticking debts. One dealer in Florida explained that just 4 banned bikes on his books led to over $150,000 in unreturnable debt. Bikes he could not sell, register, or legally transfer without disclosing liability. Even worse, warranty support often evaporates once a brand is flagged or blocked. A banned model cannot have its engine repaired, its electronics replaced, or its firmware updated. Dealerships are often the first to bear the customer's fury, despite being just as surprised as the buyer. This is not a recall. It is not a failure of engineering. It is a regulatory ambush, and dealers are left holding the keys to machines they cannot move and loans they cannot repay. But the impact does not end with the showroom floor, because even if a banned bike makes it into a rider's garage, the financial fallout is only beginning. Because the next war isn't just federal, it's being fought state by state, dealer by dealer, rider by rider. America's ban war between states. The American motorcycle market is no longer unified. It is fractured, split between states with radically different definitions of what makes a bike roadworthy. What started with emissions rules and noise regulations has now evolved into a full-blown policy divide. California, for example, has implemented aggressive restrictions on foreign-manufactured telemetry hardware, effectively banning several CF Moto and Cove models from being sold or registered. Meanwhile, in states like Florida and Texas, those exact same motorcycles are still being advertised on dealer websites with factory incentives. The result? Whiplash. One dealer group operating in both Arizona and California found itself unable to sell 10 models in one state while clearing inventory at a discount across the border. Customers do not understand why a motorcycle can be legal in Phoenix but blocked in San Diego. The confusion erodes trust, slows sales, and creates legal uncertainty for anyone moving or relocating across state lines. This state-by-state legal variance is beginning to threaten the entire dealership ecosystem. Manufacturers must now build different compliance packages depending on which state a bike is shipped to. Small brands simply cannot afford that. As a result, they pull out of restrictive markets altogether, shrinking consumer choice. Meanwhile, state-level politicians are clashing with federal agencies. Governors in low-restriction states have accused federal regulators of overreach. Attorneys general are beginning to question whether unilateral bans based on foreign software violate commerce laws. The battle is no longer just technical, it is ideological. It is about who gets to decide what freedom on two wheels looks like: Sacramento or Tallahassee, Washington or Wichita. And while lawmakers bicker over sovereignty and surveillance, riders are taking matters into their own hands. Not in court, not in policy offices, but in garages, forums, and unmarked roads. Because the more rules they write, the more riders disappear. Underground. There's more going on with these bans than meets the eye, and we're breaking it all down. If you want to be part of the conversation, like this video, share your take in the comments, and make sure you subscribe for the full story as it unfolds. Riders underground, the machines they refuse to surrender. In basements, sheds, and unlisted trailheads across the country, a new kind of motorcycle culture is taking shape. Not sponsored, not certified, not compliant, just persistent. Riders who own banned machines, whether it's a CF Moto Adventure bike, a vintage two-stroke, or a cargo trike marked for recall, aren't scrapping them. They're preserving them and riding them quietly. On backroads in Kentucky, owners have begun swapping out GPS modules with analog dummies to bypass connectivity restrictions. In upstate New York, mechanics are reverse engineering firmware to remove Chinese-made tracking code. And across hundreds of forums, guides are being published showing how to de-digitize modern bikes to avoid scrutiny. This is not lawlessness, it is defiance. These are not criminals. These are riders who feel betrayed. They bought machines legally. They maintained them faithfully. They did nothing wrong. And now they're being told that because of software or politics, their motorcycle no longer belongs on the road. So they are rewriting the rules themselves. Some are stockpiling parts before support disappears. Others are creating shadow networks of private technicians willing to work on banned bikes. In some rural states, entire subcultures are forming. Riders who trade banned models quietly, register out of state, or ride exclusively on private land. This underground movement is not massive, but it is growing, and it carries a message that regulators should fear. Push too hard and people stop listening. Regulate too far and enforcement becomes impossible. Every policy has a breaking point, and in the world of two wheels, that point is reached the moment riders feel they've lost their freedom. Not to safety, not to emissions, but to something far more abstract and far harder to fight: invisible control. This battle is just heating up, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. If you thought the bike bans were shocking, wait until you hear why senior riders are massively trading in their Harleys for this brand. Check out our previous video, Senior Riders Are Massively Trading in Their Harley for This Brand, to get the full story. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more updates as this industry shifts.